If you have someone in your life who is either an atheist or thinking about becoming an atheist or sliding in that direction, don't lose hope. There are a lot of things you can do. One of the things, is, of course, is give me a call. We'll talk about it. But there are a lot of things you can talk about with that person. You can talk about, well, where did all this come from? If God doesn't exist, why does anything exist? How could anything exist? Well, because things come in. No, nothing can come into existence on its own. Here's why. Because existence is imparted. It's handed on. It's given. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Okay, well, think about anything. Think about anything that exists. You, for example, you exist, physically speaking, because your parents produced you. They procreated you. You didn't just pop into existence. Hey, world, here I am. Because it's impossible. There would be no you to give yourself existence, because you didn't exist. And there's no you to give existence to, because there is no you before you exist. So everything that exists, you, and I'm speaking here about your physical body, the phone that you're listening to the sound of my voice on through the Relevant Radio app, or if you're listening on a radio station, that radio tower didn't just pop into existence. It was built. It owes its existence to something before it, outside of it. And this is true of everything in the universe. You can't find a single thing in the universe that doesn't come from, and I'm talking about real beings here, that doesn't come from something before it. Everything that we see around us, including the universe itself, by the way. Scientists say that it was caused by the Big Bang. Okay, I have no problem believing that. But what banged is the next question. Something had to bang in order for there to be a Big Bang. So no matter how far you push it back, everything in the universe, including the universe itself, has a cause. It's called an efficient cause because it affects the transmission of being, existence, from one thing to another. So things can't just come into existence. They're caused. And everything around us, including the universe, has a cause. And the cause is always before it. Things, as I say, just don't come into existence. So that's one question you can just ask. Just say, okay, well, we see that there are so many things that do exist. We live in a universe with unbelievable complexity and unbelievable amounts of things that exist. We know they're there. We can see them and touch them. So why does anything exist? If God doesn't exist, where did it all come from? It's a very important question to ask. What about the order that we see in the universe? And somebody, oh, come on, you're talking about intelligent design. Well, how about this? What if we just put all the polemics aside and just ask a few basic questions, okay? Chemicals, if you're a student of chemistry, you know that chemicals follow certain laws. They do certain things, and they always do these certain things. They always bond a certain way. Why? Well, it's just a law of the... I know, but that begs the question. By the way, begging the question does not mean that it leads to another question. Most of the time today, you'll hear the phrase, it begs the question, used incorrectly. Most of the time today, people say, well, it begs the question, why then do we have blah, blah, blah? That is not what begs the question means. That's basically another way of saying that leads to another question. Begging the question is a logical fallacy. Petitio principii in Latin. Now that you're here to study Latin, I get that. But it means that it doesn't answer the question. It just simply pushes it back one step. So when you say, well, that's just how chemicals react, that's begging the question. It's a logical fallacy. We have laws, and the physicists and the scientists, they know all about these laws, the conservation of energy, what happens to matter and energy, inertia, all the things that we recognize in the universe that are laws. Well, where do these laws come from? How is it that in this stable, law-driven universe where things operate according to certain things, if God doesn't exist, how come it's not just chaos? First of all, why does anything exist at all? And where did it all come from? The atheist cannot explain that. Try as he might. And if you want to prove that to yourself, just watch some of the debates on YouTube between famous atheists like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and others who try as they might cannot explain where all these things come from. Their theories are implausible, to say the least. Why is there order? Why is there a kind of purpose-driven dimension to so many things in the universe? Say in your own body, for example. The eye has a goal. It's goal-oriented. How does that even happen? How can even the idea of a goal, per se, be the result of random blind processes, forces of nature working blindly and randomly against each other over eons of time? How does that produce a goal-oriented thing like an eye? And they may say evolution. Okay, well, that's begging the question. It's just pushing it back one step. It doesn't answer the question. If I were to hold up, I don't know, something simple like a book. I've written some books, and if I held up a book of mine and I said, hey, this book in English with this particular book cover and the dust jacket, and there's a price printed on there and all these words that just happen to be intelligible and they make sense. This book is purely the result of random chance. Over eons of time, blind natural forces working randomly, blindly against each other, lightning strikes and amino acids and wind erosion and rain, and a bird flies over and poops on it, and then a dinosaur steps on it, and then more rain and wind erosion and lightning strikes. And could that ever, in a billion, trillion, zillion, gazillion years, ever produce a book? No. And even a 3-year-old child can recognize that. There's order imposed, there's design, there's meaning, there's intelligibility. Where did all this come from? Atheists cannot adequately explain that. Or how about this? The underpinning of the atheist worldview is something that's variously known as scientism, physicalism, naturalism. There are different words that are used for it, but ultimately it all boils down to this. And that is the atheist worldview posits the notion as part of the rejection of any gods, no supernatural dimension, no heaven or hell, no God up there watching you, judging you. You don't even really have a soul because that's, supernatural. And none of that really exists. The only things that really exist are natural, things that are physical in nature, which is why so many people who are enamored of atheism, they really do think that science can answer this question of whether or not God exists, or they may even go so far as to say, well, science has proven that God doesn't exist, which is ludicrous, because science deals with pre-given physical realities, and by nature, by definition, God is outside of nature. So he's an immaterial, supernatural being, if in fact he exists, so science would have nothing to say whatsoever about a realm that scientific instruments are not capable of measuring. In any case, when you consider all of these things, what about the things that are purely immaterial that we know do exist? You may say, are you talking about numbers? No. I mean, mathematical concepts, shapes, things of that nature. Sure, they do exist. They're mental beings. They're not real beings. The idea you have in your mind right now of a triangle or the letter 3, those are real, but they're immaterial, and they're concepts, okay? But what about other things that are purely immaterial? What about love, honesty, beauty? Can you go down to Lowe's or Home Depot and get yourself a box of love? No. It doesn't exist in a physical form. But yet from experience and evidence, that you love your kids. You know that your wife loves you. You know all the things that pertain to love and friendship. You know beauty when you see it. Your idea of beauty might be different from that of somebody else's. That's somewhat of a subjective thing, but these are all immaterial realities that all of us, including atheists, experience every single day. What about truth? Can you go anywhere and mine yourself a big old 50-gallon drum of truth? No. It doesn't exist in a physical form, and yet it's real. These things are real. They really do encompass and affect our lives on a daily basis. So the whole idea about saying, well, God doesn't exist, are you saying that's true? Yes, of course I'm saying that's true. Well, how do you even know what truth is if everything is purely physical? How can truth itself exist as a thing independent of matter if the only things that really exist are material things, which is, as I say, the kind of underpinning of the atheist worldview, naturalism. So all I'm saying is, these are just some of the things. You notice I never mentioned the Bible. I never mentioned God. I never mentioned Jesus or church councils or the catechism. You don't have to. It's not difficult to hold your own as a believer, a theistic believer, if you just focus on some of these basic principles using pure reason to be able to make your case for why you believe in the existence of God, and to demonstrate, I think conclusively, I'm sure many atheists would disagree with me, but I have yet to see an atheist demonstrate otherwise. You can demonstrate conclusively that the atheist worldview cannot account for reality. It can't. So that little digression there is just by way of a little booster shot maybe, or a pep talk. Don't feel cowed if your daughter brings home an atheist boyfriend. Don't be Buffalo. Don't be worried. Don't be intimidated if somebody says, well, I'm an atheist. My reaction is, okay, let's talk. Because there's a lot we have to talk about. And I won't mention the Bible. If that bothers you, we don't have to talk about the Bible or Jesus. But I do have some questions I'd like to ask you, and that can start the ball rolling. One last thing. There is so much good stuff on the interwebs, on YouTube, for example, by way of debates with high-level, prominent atheists who have their clocks cleaned by apologists, by philosophers. I'm thinking of William Lane Craig, for example. I mean, this guy is in the clock cleaning business. He's a very nice guy, friendly, respectable, the kind of guy you'd like to have over for dinner. And man, does he clean these guys' clocks, because he understands exactly how to critique atheism. And if you want to see it for yourself, watch some of these debates. Watch the Biola debate. It was held at Biola University in La Mirada, California a few years ago. It was William Lane Craig debating Christopher Hitchens on the existence of God. Christopher Hitchens being one of the prominent atheists until his recent death, may he rest in peace. I'm quite confident he's no longer an atheist. But don't shy away from these issues. In fact, if anything, you need to run toward them, because this is the big thing right now. And atheism is very fashionable, and you, as a believer, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your kids to know how to respond to it. What does it say in 1 Peter 3:15? Always be ready to give an answer, a defense, it says in some translations. Always be able to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. But do it with gentleness and respect. By the way, that word in Greek that we translate as defense, it's apologion. It means apologetics. Always be ready to do apologetics, not defensively, not angrily, but calmly and charitably, patiently, lovingly, respectfully. Take the time to learn why you believe what you believe. If you believe in God, great, but you have to know why you believe in God, so that you can at least say, when somebody says, well, you're stupid or anti-scientific, or you're superstitious for believing in God, you can calmly respond and say, well, no, really, I'm none of those things, but let me share with you why I believe in God. And then you give your 2-minute elevator speech. It's not hard. It just takes a little bit of effort on your part, and it has big dividends that it will pay off in your life and the lives of other people.